I will never, ever take my foot off the gas because I have this inherent fear that if I do, everything that I've worked so hard for will all go away tomorrow. And there are
Wow.
certain things in my life where that does not serve me well. But when it comes to business, that does serve me pretty well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Munn. Welcome to another episode of the Pick Now podcast, where we talk about the scary choices that entrepreneurs need to make along the journey without knowing how it's going to work out. Today, I have a really special guest, someone who is an entrepreneur now, but actually started out as a Major League Baseball player. So, Jacob Turner, welcome to the Pick Now podcast.
Jeff, I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, you and I connected on LinkedIn, I don't know, a couple months ago, and have been talking since then. And I just think it's fascinating, this journey from being, a major league ball player to then kind of, having that come to its natural conclusion, and then deciding to go into the world of wealth management. So let's start out with the Major League Baseball stuff. Like, when did you know, oh, this is actually this playing in the major leagues thing is an actual possibility?
Well, I think growing up, it was always my dream, right? As a kid, I wanted to play Major League Baseball, but the reality
was mine too, but I never came close.
The reality of it actually setting in, I think, as I started to get later on in high school, you started to see that there was Division I opportunities, and then had really an incredible senior season of high school. And I got drafted straight out of high school as an 18-year-old. Got to the big leagues at 20 years old. And I think if you would have told 15, 16-year-old Jacob that would happen, I'm not sure he would have believed you. So,
yeah,
as much as I would like to say, like, I saw it coming, I don't think you really quite know it's coming until you actually get to that point.
it had to feel pretty surreal, I would think. And it's not uncommon for baseball players to get drafted straight out of high school, right? So you didn't have that
I would
experience
say,
playing
I don't know what
college
the
ball
numbers are, but I don't know what the numbers are, but the way the Major League Baseball draft works is now we have 20 rounds. At the time they had 50 rounds. So there's quite a few guys that will get drafted out of high school that will bypass a potential college opportunity. And it's not like the NHL where, the team has your rights and you still go to college. You actually go straight to the professional team and you're in the minor leagues then.
Uh-huh. And so did you ask yourself, or did your parents or other people around you, did they say, Jacob, are you sure you want to do this? Don't you want to go to college first? I mean, was there any of that in your mind, or it was like, this is the dream and I'm going to go for it?
Well, I think now as an entrepreneur, I think the term we would use is we want to make asymmetric bets. So bets that we feel like the upside far outweighs the downside. And like anything in life, look, there's pros and cons to it. Signing out of high school as an 18-year-old, there are plenty of downsides. I will never get to experience a normal college atmosphere, right? I went to school online. It was not, I didn't do the fraternity, sorority thing. I didn't do the college campus thing. There's certainly downsides to it, but there was a lot of pros to it. And those pros at the time, and even now, as I think about it, far outweighed any potential downsides of it. It became a situation where it would feel silly to pass up the opportunity that was in front of me.
Mm-hmm. And so what was that like for you? Like the first couple years before you actually made it to the major leagues, what was that like?
I think what people miss about pro sports is they think that pro sports is what we see on ESPN, and they see the glitz and the glamour, and they see the big contracts. And there's certainly an element of pro sports that is that. But I think what most people miss is there is a huge underbelly, if you will, of pro sports that's nothing like that. Minor league baseball, especially when I was there, we're talking long bus rides. The majority of the guys I played with did not sign for a lot of money. They were making, roughly $1,200 every month. So we're talking very minimal income. And that's for 5 months out of the year, right? We're only getting paid for the time that we're working. So being a first round draft pick, I was fortunate to sign for a lot of money, but a lot of these guys weren't. And it was a really interesting experience from that perspective. It was also an interesting perspective because you're coming into a situation as an 18-year-old where you are now playing against what at the time I would title as like grown men, right? 25-year-olds. They've been doing this thing a long time. You're the new guy on the block. What are you going to do? You're also coming into a world where not everybody speaks English. There's a lot of players from the Dominican. There's a lot of players from Venezuela. These
Yeah.
players are 18 to 22. They're trying to assimilate with the culture in the United States while trying to get to the big leagues. And you have this conjunction of all these different things happening at once, and you're trying to wrap your brain around it while trying to compete on the field, while realizing that, yes, this thing is fun, but now it's a business, right? Like, I'm in the business of trying to get to the big leagues and help this team win.
Right. And they're in the business of trying to like thin people out, right? Like it's a screening, it's like every game's a tryout.
Well, the analogy I would give you, and for those of us that are in business, the analogy is like, whatever position you're in, whether you're the owner of the company, whether you're a key employee of the company, whether you just started out of the company, just assume that company is going out every single week and they're actively scouting other players to take your place. And then once a year, they're going to have an opportunity to go out and sign any player they want that could potentially take your place. And they're also going to draft another 20 guys that are going to come in that are going to be young and hungry and super talented. And they really hope they take your place because they're going to be cheaper in the long term. And that is what pro sports is. And I think oftentimes it's very hard as a player to realize how quickly the career can go from, wow, this thing's fun, I just started out, to, I'm on my last leg of this thing. And if I don't figure this thing out real fast, I'm going to have to go get a quote unquote normal job.
Right. Right. So what was that process like for you? I mean, you were in the bigs for how long were you actually in the major leagues? How many seasons?
Yeah, so my journey was drafted at 18 to the major leagues at 20. And then from the time I was 20 to 29 was back and forth between the major leagues and the big leagues. I played, I think it was parts of 8 seasons at the major league level, about 4.5 years of total service time. What that means is, every day you're in the big leagues, you get a day of service time. So 4.5 years would be like 4 consecutive years that you're in the big leagues the entire time. So I have about 4.5 years of service time. And my career spanned about 11 years. So if I got to the big leagues, roughly a year and a half into my career, there was a lot of ups and downs between the big leagues, back to AAA, back to the big leagues, back to AAA. And then my last year playing, I played in Korea, which is the KBO, which is the Korean baseball organization, which is their version of the major leagues there.
That's got to be psychologically really challenging.
You learn quickly that the people that are around you in these organizations are not bad people, but they in fact do have a job to do. And I think as an 18 and 21-year-old, sometimes I felt like, oh man, this so-and-so's, they're out to get me because they want me, they send me back to AAA. But you quickly realize, like, look, they have a job to do, you have a job to do, and there is no performance improvement plan when it comes to professional sports. You either do the job, or we will find somebody else that does the job. And hopefully we'll find somebody else that does the job better and cheaper.
Did you ever feel like you were just kind of like settled in and it's like, oh, I've got this figured out? Or was it always just like, I feel like the ground beneath me is shaky?
I had a small stretch, I want to say it was maybe 2012 or 2013, where a stretch of maybe 8 to 10 starts where things were really going well. And you start to feel like you have these things established. But one thing that sports will teach you, particularly baseball, which is a game of failure, is it is extremely humbling. In the minute that you take your foot off the gas and you think you've made it, is the minute that you realize, like, it's too late. It's already in the rearview mirror and I can't turn around. And one analogy I would give you in one story is what I tell everybody, even the young athletes we work with today, is like, once you get off the hype train of everybody hyping you up as the next big thing, it's very hard to get back on it. And I think it was 2018, I played with Max Scherzer, 2017 with the Washington Nationals. Max Scherzer, for those that don't know baseball, is a future Hall of Famer. He's won a couple Cy Youngs, won a couple World Series, arguably like a top 5 pitcher of the most recent generation. Really, really good player. He's in, let's call it, year 5 of his $200 million deal. He's done everything that you can possibly do up to this point in the game. And he's talking about in spring training what he's working on. And he's talking about it with like this level of intensity of like, if he doesn't figure this out, he's not going to make the team. I mean, this is the guy that's starting on opening day. He's the best pitcher on the roster. He's making the most money. If he didn't throw a pitch all spring training, he's starting on opening day.
Yeah.
And he's out there with this level of conviction, like, I have got to get this figured out. I got to get it figured out fast. And I think it was a really good life lesson for me. And something that I've taken away is like, I will never, ever take my foot off the gas, because I have this inherent fear that if I do, everything that I've worked so hard for will all go away tomorrow. And there are
Wow.
certain things in my life where that does not serve me well. But when it comes to business, that does serve me pretty well.
Yeah, that's a difficult place to live in 24/7.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. But you went exactly where I was going to ask you, like the ups and downs of baseball and the things that you were exposed to. Like, what did you take from that, and what did you learn from that, and how are you applying that now? So you get to the end of your career, and like, do you know when it's coming? Or is it just like it could have ended in 2015, it could have ended in 16, 17? Is it just like you're never gonna you're never gonna know when you're gonna get, well, you don't actually get the call, right? You just don't get a call.
I did not get that Derek Jeter retirement tour where they get to play the
Yeah,
extra
yeah.
season, go to all the places, get all the cool gear. And I guess I'd flip the question around and ask you this. In your work working with successful people,
Yeah.
how often do you have somebody come to you and they're kind of telling you about how things are going, but you can almost hear in the tone of their voice, they're like, it's going really good, Jeff. And you're looking at it
Yeah, it's
from
great.
a
It's
very
great.
rational lens. And
Yeah.
you're thinking, I know it's not going well, but maybe it's ego. Maybe it's something else that they're afraid to really say how it's going. Would you say that's a fair thing that you come across?
Absolutely. And I think it's not even that they're afraid to admit it to me. I think oftentimes they're afraid to admit it to themselves.
And that is what I would say every athlete goes through towards the end of their
Uh-huh.
career. Deep down, really deep down, they know when it's starting to come to an end. But we've been so conditioned as people and as athletes, there's typically some level of ego involved. You don't want to be looked at as weak and talking about in the locker room that, like, man, I'm trying everything and nothing's working. And I'm 30 years old now, and I got to figure out, like, am I going to keep doing this? Like, who in the
Right.
locker room are you going to talk to about that?
Right.
So I think, to your question, I think every athlete sees the end. I know for me, what the end looked like for me was I was going to go to Korea. I was going to try to make some adjustments that were
Uh-huh.
relatively drastic. If I could
Uh-huh.
see results from that, that would give me a good sight line to what my future career looked like. And if I couldn't get the results of that, I was also fine saying, like, I gave it every effort I possibly could. But it took me a long time to come to the point of, like, hey, I'm not going to do this thing forever. I think when you get
Mhm.
drafted as an 18-year-old, you think you're going to play in the big leagues for the next 10, 15 years. And when the MLB Players Association comes in and says this line, which they say all the time, you will be a former player a lot longer than you'll be a current player. You
Yeah.
immediately think, that's great, but you're talking about somebody else, not me.
Yeah, sure. Well, and so for you, it happens in your late 20s, kind of into 30. And so it's not like you're old. We think of the, outside the sporting world, we think of like the we see the long careers, right? The people who go till they're like 35, and then their physical stills, start to decline a little bit, and there's like this natural process, and it's gradual. But that's not the case for most of the people who are going through this, right? They kind of get to a point, and maybe they have a success that the question is, can they sustain it, or is it a fluke? And you don't really know, and then it goes away.
And it goes away quick. And I think
Yeah.
I would challenge anybody, especially when you're thinking about pro sports in general, like, take a look
Yeah.
at whatever your favorite pro sports team is and whatever league it is, doesn't matter. Other than golf, maybe.
Yeah.
The people that were on that team 3 years ago, count up how many people are still on that team today.
Right.
Because we
Right.
see the stories of, Major League Baseball, you see the stories of the top players, whether it's a Mike Trout or a Bryce Harper. In basketball, you see a LeBron James or Steph Curry. These guys were, they've been icons for so long.
Yeah.
But the reality is, for 90+% of athletes, it's not the case.
Yeah.
There might be a few guys that are on a team for a really long period in time. I'm from St. Louis, so I grew up a Cardinals fan. We had this era of Pujols and Wainwright and Yadier Molina where it was this collection of three guys that were there for 10 years. And Pujols had the
Mhm.
stretch where he went to Anaheim and then came back. But most teams, I mean, it's very few guys are really there for a really long period in time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so different than a more traditional corporate career, which, as you pointed out, you're going to be in that more traditional kind of post athletic part of your life. So when did you begin to think about, hey, this isn't going to last forever. What am I going to do after this is over?
I think for me, one of the biggest benefits I had was that I had failure early on in my professional career, and it helped me to really level set what baseball was in my life, what it meant to me, and the fact
Can
that
you
I
talk
wasn't going to
about
do it forever.
failure? Because you got drafted number 9.
Yep.
Do you feel like you were considered to be an underachiever?
I don't think underachiever is the right word. The what I tell people is I had a, I don't know, 3 out of 10 baseball outcome, and
Uh-huh.
I had a 10 out of 10 financial outcome.
Yeah.
And what I mean by the 3 out of 10 outcome is if you think about top 10 picks, so I went from a top 10 pick to a top 10 prospect in all of baseball in the next year, which essentially
Uh-huh.
means I got drafted in the very first year. I was doing everything and probably exceeding the expectations that anybody had for me.
Uh-huh.
I get to the big leagues as a 20-year-old. If you look at the guys that have gotten to the big leagues as a 20-year-old, it's a laundry list of guys that have made multiple all-star games, guys that have went on to have borderline Hall of Fame careers. So it'd be very easy for me to say, well, that's where I should have gone.
Right.
And my career didn't go like that, right?
Yeah.
By the time I was 23, I was back in AAA. I was getting designated for assignment, which just essentially means like you can go anywhere, you just can't stay here. By the
Mm.
time I was 25. So failure was a huge part of what my career looked like. And frankly, for the longest time, Jeff, I didn't understand quite like, why am I having all this failure? Right. Like I'm putting
Yeah,
in all
I
the
would
work.
I would imagine that would be a
Um,
huge part of this.
I'm thinking I'm pretty talented at this thing, but I'm starting to question like, man, am I really cut out to do this? Like, do I really have
Mhm.
the ability to have long-term success at this level?
Yeah. Yeah. And so what did you do with that? Like that
Well,
that's
for the
that's a
longest
lot
time,
to live with, to think, hey, there's something I'm not getting, or there's something I'm not doing. I mean, I could imagine you'd get into a place where you're, beating yourself up or grinding more than you should, or like, how did that show up for you?
I am a borderline perfectionist when it comes to a lot of things. And
Uh-huh.
what I always say about those that are in pro sports, especially a sport like baseball, where there's a lot of downtime, there's a lot of
Yeah.
thinking. To have success, you need to be on one end of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you are like the perfectionist that's super analytical, and you find a way to hone that for your success, your benefit.
Hmm.
Or there's nothing going on, and you're like, I'm not thinking about anything. Like literally, I
Yeah.
just like, I'm a baseball player. And I can
Yeah.
think of teammates I played with that are on both sides of that, where they're like, I just went out there and I played. I didn't really even think about the scouting report. And I think
Yeah.
about teammates I had that spent the entire week thinking about the scouting report for the next team, but I found a way to hone that.
Uh-huh.
And I think for me, there was a time where my analytical side, my perfectionist side started to get in the way of that. You started to see failure. You started to let these other thoughts creep in. You started to let all these different opinions. At that point, like everybody in the organization has an opinion about how they're going to change you, what you're doing wrong, how you need to
Hmm.
fix this or do this differently. And it can become this snowball in the wrong direction, right?
Right. Right.
I think
Sure.
to go back to a point that we made earlier, a lot of times it takes just admitting where you're at. Like, hey, if a 10 is like me performing at an all-star level, I feel like I'm at like a 2 right now. But what I
Hmm.
would tell everybody is like, hey, I'm at like a 7. Like I'm really close. But in my head, I'm
Mm.
like, I am not close. Like I'm coming to the ballpark and I'm like,
Yeah.
I do not know what is going to happen tonight. And I sure
Yeah.
hope I don't give up 5 runs in the first inning.
Wow. That can't be a great mindset to walk into a game with.
It's not super fun, especially when you're doing it in front of 40,000 people. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So to back to the kind of the transition to post athletic life, where did the idea of becoming like, oh, I want to go into wealth management, I want to become a certified financial planner, or whatever, whatever
Yeah.
aspects of that, Where did that idea come from for you?
I think it probably started early on. My dad was a small business owner. My mom has a background in accounting, so they were always around numbers. We're
Hmm.
always aware of that when we were growing up as kids. And then when I signed, I signed for a lot of money as an 18-year-old. And frankly, I just thought, like, I don't want to blow it. I don't want to lose it
Hmm.
all. I want to understand like what things I need to do to make sure that like this money lasts. And then I think going throughout my career, seeing what other guys were doing with their money and how, I don't know if checked out would be the right term, but not aware of what was going
Hmm.
on with their finances was always pretty striking to me. Combine that with the fact that like I don't love the term financial advisor, and I thought, what
Uh-huh.
better way for me to educate people than to
Yeah.
become a financial advisor? And what I tell people is like, if you get on an airplane and you sit next to somebody and they say, what do you do? And you say, I
Uh-huh.
sell insurance or I'm a financial advisor, that
Yeah.
person's probably going to put on their AirPods and be like, that was nice meeting you. I'll see you when the flight lands. Um,
Yeah.
and I joke because when I first got done, I wanted to do something to educate people around money. I didn't know what that was going to be. And it really stemmed from the fact of like, I think I made some smart decisions with my money, but at the same time, I had some really good people around me helping to make those decisions. And I saw so often these people that had done everything right in order to make a really ungodly amount of money in a really short period in time
Hmm.
truly wasted because they didn't have people around them that were protecting their best interests, that were explaining it to them in terms that they understand, that were really outlining what they should and what they shouldn't do. They were more concerned about staying on that person's team and being a part of
Hmm.
that person's circle than speaking
Yeah.
truth into them.
So besides your parents, who were those people for you?
I would put my parents at the top of that list.
Hmm.
There was a lot of different people that helped me in different aspects. My father-in-law was in this business. He helped set me up with some people that did right by me early on. There were some people with my agency that I was with at the time that made sure that the people that I did have on my team were doing the things that they said they were going to be doing.
Hmm.
There was a lot of people in my life that were helping to have checks and balances. Because the thing that most people miss, and athletes get picked on all the time, right? Like they're not smart with money. 70% of athletes go broke. You name whatever stat is out there. Whether
Right.
those stats are true or not, the thing that's missed in that conversation is these are young men or young women that are coming into millions of dollars as an 18 to 22-year-old. And even now with NIL and rev share, potentially even earlier.
Hmm.
Think about your level of financial acumen as an 18 to 22-year-old.
Well,
Probably pretty
yeah, for me, it
minimal.
wouldn't have even been about acumen. It would have been like, I want to treat myself. I want to celebrate. I
Yep.
want to, like, in addition, like, even if rationally I knew I shouldn't be doing this, I think as an 18-year-old, I would have had a hard time resisting that.
Well, and then you combine that with the fact that you're just truly, truly trusting the person that you put on the other side of the table that you hired to help you with this thing.
Yeah.
Because if they provide some solution or some outcome that you want, you're just trusting that whatever solution they implement for you is like actually in your best interest and actually the one that you should be implementing because you don't have any life experience to know otherwise.
Yeah.
And if you think about most people, they're going to go from making a relatively modest amount of money when they graduate college to as they gain skills and gain experience, they're going to start earning more and more and more later on in their career. So if they make a financial mistake early on, it's kind of like stubbing their toe versus like as an athlete, if we make a financial mistake early on, it's like breaking our leg. There's no
Hmm.
going back. There's no do over to make sure that we do that right again. We have one shot to do it right on the upfront with the money that we're earning.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it because you do think about I know that you work with entrepreneurs and founders and also with athletes and um, the entrepreneur, they may have been building their company for 30 years. What do you
Even
see as
that
the
though,
difference? But between those two, like there's just a chronological maturity. There's the amount of time they've had. There's the effort they've put into that. Like, do you see those experiences? If you think of the athlete at the end of their career versus the founder who sells the company, how are they similar and how are they different?
they're similar in the sense that from a baseline level, level, they bet on themselves. They're doing something that most people told them that they either shouldn't do, they were silly to do, it wasn't going to work,
Mm-hmm.
and they made it happen. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You think about it like an athlete, that's true for almost any athlete you'll talk to. For a business owner, I know when we first started our business, I remember a family friend of mine saying, well, are you sure you want to take that much risk? And
Yeah.
what they were really saying is like, I don't think you should do that. But what they were really
Mm-hmm.
saying is like, I would never do that. And that's great. Like,
Yeah.
it's not right for everybody, but don't portray like your beliefs and how you think about life on me. How they're different is by the time an entrepreneur starts earning really significant money, they've started to see how hard it is to earn the money that they're earning typically.
Mm.
Now, there are a few businesses out there where they go from like 0 to 100 overnight, but I would even argue that even those businesses, if they do it in 12 to 24 months, those founders are grinding every single day to make it happen.
Yeah.
If you think about a typical founder, they're an overnight success in roughly 10 years, where it's like in
Mm-hmm.
10 years, they've started making real money from their business and they know how hard it was. And maybe they started it thinking it was going to be easy, but I can assure you by the time they're 10 years in, they realize it was not easy. So they really want to be a good steward of the money and they want to be really thoughtful with how they're protecting the money
Mm-hmm.
versus with an athlete, it's happening when you sign that piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that like you didn't put in the work before that happened, but especially for me as like a drafted athlete, I put in a lot of work, but I was a high school baseball player.
Right.
It wasn't like I'd spent 10 years in the big leagues grinding away and then I got this big, contract. It was like I got a contract as an 18-year-old. You just have no semblance of how hard it is. I mean, the analogy is like I have 4 kids. If my kids do chores to earn whatever money they have, they're going to be less apt to spend that money on some silly purchase at the mall than if I just gave them $10.
Right. Right. Well, and it's really interesting with the athlete, and maybe an analogy would be the athlete versus the startup founder who's getting venture capital. It's like you've got these people fighting over what your potential is as opposed to what your actual results are. And the entrepreneur who's built the company over 10 years without funding, they bootstrapped it, they know, yeah, I built this and it has an actual result and this is what it's worth. And at the front end, when the VC says, hey, we really like your potential, we're going to give you $100 million to grow this thing, it's got to be a totally different headspace.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of ways to do it and there's a lot of ways to think about it. And it is really interesting to think about a lot of the tie-ins that I see between a lot of the entrepreneurs we work with and a lot of the athletes in terms of just like how they think, but
Uh-huh.
how they got to where they're at is it's always a unique journey, right? And how they think
Yeah.
about it and the scars that they have and the things that they value, they usually come from a place of really unique experiences they've had along the way.
Yeah. What's your favorite exit story of a client that you've worked with?
We had a client that exited somewhat recently, and it was really cool to hear about their journey
Mm-hmm.
of starting out. And when I say starting out, I mean like the first 5 years starting out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I met them later on. And by the time I had met them, they were cool to everybody that they came across, right? Like every
Mm-hmm.
time I was in their circle, everybody wanted to talk to them. They were kind of like this name in this specific industry that people really, really looked up to. And I had probably known them for, I don't know, 6 months to a year. And I heard one of them give a talk and he talked about when they first started the company, what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I never heard him talk about it. And like when I say humble beginnings, it wasn't like humble beginnings for like 6 months or a year or 2 years. It was like almost like delusional humble beginnings of like, you were still doing this after 5 years and you were making what?
Wow.
And now, they've been doing it 20 plus years and they, sold the business recently for an incredible outcome for them. But that's the thing that I always go back to. And, people ask me, they say, Jacob, you go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently? And usually what
Mm.
they're really getting at is like, is there one thing you could do different again, that instead of having a 3 out of 10 baseball outcome, you could have a 10 out of 10 baseball outcome?
Yeah.
And what I tell them is like, the thing that I would do different is I would enjoy the journey and the process that I went through more.
Yeah.
And it sounds cliche, but the reality is we are all searching for like the end goal, whatever we have, whatever that end goal is, right? We're recording this podcast at the beginning of 2026. I can all but guarantee a lot of people have set up goals for the year. And all they're thinking about is like, if I could get to that goal, then I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be fulfilled. I'm going to be content. But one thing I realized, both in my own journey and with all the business owners that we work with, is if they sell a business, they're going to feel pretty much the same about 48 hours later.
Mm-hmm.
And if I said like, hey, let's go sit around the campfire and talk about entrepreneur stories, the stories that are going to light them up, the stories that they're going to smile about, are the stories of when they first started out, when they were like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make this first payroll, or they made that really big bet that they're like, I don't know if that was going to pay off or not, but like, you won't believe what happened and how it actually worked out.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's, is so cool about it. And that's the part to me that's like the most enjoyable. And it's a hard thing to do on a day-to-day basis because we all want the end outcome, but you really got to stay present in the journey.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And there's this mentality that, we've got to like grind and suffer, and then we'll get to this point where, it's an exit or something else. Right. And we'll call that the destination, where everything is, I'm going to be happy and fulfilled and everything.
Yep.
And you just see over and over again that that's not the case. I was speaking at a group of exited founders in September in Colorado, and they to a T, they echoed what you said. First of all, I think the phrase that I kept hearing was valley of despair. It wasn't that it didn't change them when they left. It's that they lost their identity and they had no idea what to do. So these are people who had 8-figure and up checks. They had, lifetime generational wealth, and they were depressed. And when I asked them, what did you, when you think back fondly, what are the stories? It was like the early days, the grinding it out, that we didn't know if we were going to make it, like just enjoying that process. And, I tell my clients, if you're not building a business that you enjoy running, what are you doing? If you enjoy running it and you end up selling it, great. But if you enjoy running it and you don't end up selling it, you don't end up having the big, windfall, well, now you've got a business that you enjoy running.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I had somebody come to me recently and they said, man, it looks like you guys are having so much fun. And I said, let me think about that for a second. At the time, I think I was in some random airport in Texas.
Yeah.
I said, I don't know if fun would be the right term.
Yeah.
I said gratifying, extremely gratifying.
Yeah.
But fun is like going to watch my 8-year-old son play ice hockey. That's like fun.
Right.
Like there's no stress for me. I just get to watch him do the thing that he loves to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that everybody gets into entrepreneurship to do something for themselves, to own their schedule, whatever it may be. And, we all think it's probably going to be easier than it ends up being. And then you realize it's not that easy, but it is the most gratifying and enjoyable thing I've done in my life, even outside of baseball. And I think it's gratifying because as humans, as people, we are meant to do things that are hard.
Yes.
And the way that, somebody sent me a message on LinkedIn today, and I respond with the same response to everybody that sends me this message. Hey, I'm just starting out. What advice would you give me? And the advice I give them is to write down what their perfect day is. If you could just map out your perfect day, like you wake up at what time? What do you do right when you wake up? And then what do you do throughout the day? And then what do you do when you go to bed? Because like the world has told us that fun would be like me sitting on the couch all day watching Netflix.
Oh, yeah. That's not what we're talking about at all.
Not fun for me, right?
Yeah.
Like I would be like super,
maybe
man,
2
what am I
days of
doing?
it.
Yeah, maybe. Certainly,
and
like a couple of days of it. But I think that's one of the things people need to understand is like my perfect day is doing hard, challenging things at some point. And hard,
Right.
challenging things means like I don't know what the outcome's going to be. Because
Right.
if I was just playing life on easy mode and I knew I was going to win all the time, it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be challenging. It wouldn't be gratifying. But I do
Yeah.
think there's a big difference between something being like fun in my business and something being like very gratifying. And I much more crave gratifying than fun.
I think gratifying is a great word that really gets at the essence of what you and I are talking about here, because there is something that, I mean, I equate it to like a really hard workout where it's not necessarily enjoyable in the moment. You could be trying as hard as you can. You could be in pain. You could be depleted. But man, afterwards, like you feel so good that you did it.
Yeah, I think it's, people talk about this runner's high if they run. And I think it's much the same to that of like
Yeah.
you halfway through a run, you're not sure if you're going to die or not. And then by the time you get done, you're like, man, I'm really glad I did that. I feel great. I have
Yeah.
all these endorphins. I feel great.
Yeah. So what have been, clearly you have that capacity as an athlete. What have been the mindsets or the routines that have served you well as now an entrepreneur, as a business builder? The things that you don't necessarily enjoy in the moment, but you know that they will be gratifying.
I tell people the only thing that I'm elite at in life is continuing to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing I learned through professional sports, I learned through some life experiences that weren't super great early on is life does not care about how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Life cares about what you do despite how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that, for me, it's doing the things that I know I need to be consistent with on a day in and day out basis to have the quote unquote success that I want to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's different for everybody, right? But I
Uh-huh.
think we have to all determine like, what are we willing to do to get to the things that we say we really want?
Right. One thing that I run into occasionally is someone who says, hey, I've got it great. I'm making more money than I ever thought. My kids are happy. I've got a good marriage. Um, why would I risk any of that? Like there's a thing they want to do, but they don't know if it's going to work. And so they hold themselves back. And then 6 months later, a year later, they end up in a funk. They end up depressed. They end up, just, and not wondering, thinking, well, I don't get it. There shouldn't be anything wrong. Like everything outside is perfect. And yet I feel empty inside. Like, how do you encourage people to keep driving? Because I agree with you. I feel like we're kind of here to create, to strive, to struggle, and that it actually feels like something's missing when we're not doing that. And yet I see people hold themselves back because they're afraid of losing what they have.
I think it starts with asking yourself the opposite question of like, if I don't do this thing, will I regret it more than if I do this thing and I
Yeah.
fail? Right. And
Yeah.
I think Tim Ferriss, who's a great podcaster, great blogger, great writer, great entrepreneur, he has an incredible blog on fear setting. And essentially what it
Mm-hmm.
is in a nutshell is like, if the absolute worst thing happens, what does that actually look like? Because
Yeah.
we drum it up in our head as like, oh my gosh, like, my family's all going to walk out the door and I'm going to lose my business and the roof
Yeah.
over my head's going to be gone. I'm going to be on the street tomorrow. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, like what would really happen? Like really write it down, really think about it, and then determine like, hey, is it worth taking whatever level of risk that is?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is doing things that are outside of our comfort zone, doing things from a growth perspective, they should be really specific to you and what you want out of life and what you are trying to accomplish. I have a friend of mine who we talked about this recently, and he said, "Hey Jacob, like from a business standpoint, like things are going really well. Much like you said, Jeff, like his family's in a good situation, but he's like, the thing I'm most on fire about is my faith and my walk with the
Mm.
Lord. And
Hmm.
there's some things that I'm starting to do that might rub some people in my business the wrong way.
Mm.
And I'm okay with that because
Hmm.
like that's the thing that like I really want to keep growing in. And I think that can be unique for everybody, right? It doesn't have to be faith for everybody. It could be anything. It could be something as simple as you want to get in better shape and you set out to run a marathon that year, or you set out to do an Ironman, or you want to have a better relationship with your wife. And you determine that, like, for me and my wife, we go to breakfast once a week. It's like we go
Hmm.
to breakfast once a week. I want to grow the business, but like if somebody wants to meet when we go to breakfast, like we go to breakfast.
Yeah.
And I think
It's Tuesday. We're
it's
going to
just
breakfast. We'll do it
it's just
another day.
getting
Right.
specific around like what are the things that you're actually trying to get better at, and then really focusing on those things. And I think, I know there's a lot of people that listen to this that are business owners that are either entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs in the future, but that doesn't have to be, that's not the path for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, for me, I noticed that lack when, the first, I don't know, 40 years of my life, I did what other people told me I should do to be happy. So, I got great grades. I went to a, great law school, went to a law firm, was on the partner track. And like that was kind of my first awakening, was maybe when I was 30 or so. And it was like, the partners in this law firm don't actually seem to be happy. Like why is, if this is like the big carrot, it doesn't seem that great to me. And it really wasn't until that point that I like thought about, well, what do I want as opposed to what do other people expect of me? And that's one thing that I run into too, is like people are so tuned into what everyone around them expects of them and they're less in tune with what do I actually want and how do I answer that question that you just asked.
I heard there's a great tweet about this. Alex Ramosi, who's a big business influencer,
Yeah.
incredible entrepreneur, and he had a tweet about, I think it was the Queen of England, and it might have been like 3 months after she had passed away. And he said, "You remember when the Queen of England died?" Something to that effect. Nobody
Uh-huh.
does either.
Yeah.
And I think his whole point in getting at it, it sounds like really brash, but like we're all gonna die at some point.
Yeah.
And the time that we spend thinking what other people think of us is so much greater than the time other people spend thinking about us. And the
Yeah.
reality is like nobody is going to be thinking about you when you are long gone,
Right.
other than the people that you make an impact in this world. And if you do that in a way that there's somebody else that talks negatively about you, okay, so
Yeah.
what? Move on. And I do think, even from a baseball perspective and a sports perspective, that's one of the greatest gifts that I got early on was like, I just realized that for so long in baseball, I was trying to please everybody else. And then you
Hmm.
get to a certain point and you realize like, man, that is a losing game. I will never ever win that game. And
Right.
instead, I'm really going to get clear around like, who are the people that like I want to impact? And I told somebody this the other day. I said, I don't think I have a huge bus of people. I say bus, like who are the people that are like, they're like the people that I'm going to ride or die with. I said, I
Right.
think I have like a hockey bus or a
Hmm.
hockey bench. Like a
Hmm.
hockey bench has, I don't know, 20 guys can sit on a hockey bench.
Yeah.
But I'm like, those are my people. And
Yeah.
like, if I want to do something, like I'm going to respect their opinion. And if they tell me like, hey, I don't think you should do that, or they're going to give me feedback on something, like those are the people that like I really value what they have to say. And it's going to change potential actions. Everybody else, it's okay. Like they can find somebody else. And I just think we care way too much about what other people think.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, the irony is we take that and we think that if we're if we're somehow trying to figure out what we want, that it's selfish. When it's actually, it's what we're all doing. And you're right, like trying to play the pleasing game, it's a losing contest because first of all, I can't even know what you think, let
Yeah.
alone like I'm trying to please Jacob based on what I think Jacob is thinking. It's like it's all an internal game. We just don't see it. And
I think the other thing is like you have no idea what somebody else's life experiences are, what
yeah,
somebody else is going through that day. So when you have that interaction with them, you're like, I don't think they like me. And it's
right,
like, well,
right. We make it about us
you
instead of
have
like,
no
yeah, dude's
idea
having a tough day.
what they had happen and what they
Yeah,
had happened that day or the previous day or the previous year, or there was something that came up that like you have no context.
right. Well, and I think to go to your hockey bench analogy, which I think is a really great one. Um, we get to pick who's on that bench. We get to pick people who see the good in us and challenge us, and who we see the good in and we want to challenge, and really like lift each other up. And I think that's an amazing place to come from and be, rather than just assuming that the cards are dealt and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, look, I think you should take advice from the people that you respect. But so often we are taking every single input that comes in
Right.
and we're letting it sit there and we're giving it brain space and we're giving it time and energy that like it just shouldn't have. Just
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
And look, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. But the
Yeah.
more often we can do that and build that muscle of like, I hear you. It's okay. It's still not for me. I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. I'm moving forward. If you could take that mindset to most of the things you do, you're going to be better off.
I think that is a great place to end this conversation. So, Jacob, if people want to find out more about you, potentially want to work with Moment Wealth, what's the best way for them to keep tabs on you, reach out to you, and so forth?
I post a lot of content on social, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. My handle on all those platforms is the Jacob Turner. And then our company website is momentprivatewealth.com.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the Pick Now podcast. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you next time with another interview and another episode. Take care.